And I think AI is just a continuation of that sort of, I'll call it, elasticity. If you're engaged, you've been having to deal with changes continually.
You are tuned in to Fireside ChatGPTz.
Interviews.
Here is your host, Liv Erickson.
Well, let's welcome to the program Mike Canales of Owensboro Community and Technical College.
Yeah, glad to be here. Appreciate the invite.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, Mike.
Well, I'm the program director at Owensboro Community Tech College for the Healthcare Facilities Leadership Program. It's an online program. It's been around for the 13th year now. I came out of healthcare. I was 25 years in healthcare, 21 years facilities director, had 2 hospitals. And education is something, in fact, it's the only program in the country. I have students all over the country. And so knew that education, a scaffolded, structured, developmental method, work and learn, is my program, was needed. And hope that it really becomes essentially the way our industry does develop people for maintaining hospitals. And that's me in a nutshell. And from then, it's been just kind of learning how to be a professor, be an academic, be an instructor, how to continue to adapt to not just changes within academia, but changes with technology. And of course, healthcare is always evolving and changing. So yeah, there's just a lot of transitional pieces, and I love it. I really love what I love about what I do now. I love what I did before. But I think like any other academic, I love how I see lives transformed through education. And I love the opportunities that students have. And I have friends and students all over the country that when I visit any town or city, I can go to dinner with somebody. And I like, it's just wonderful. It's a wonderful way. Again, we're about relationships. I have great relationships around the country through education.
Semester, I have at least 2 or 3 students in my classes who write about AI and healthcare. So I find the topic pretty interesting because these are students who are going into healthcare and have a lot of thoughts about AI and healthcare. I assume you do as well.
Oh, I do. In fact, as an academic, I feel like I'm still in the industry because I study the industry. I work with these students. They call me all the time. I adjust my program based on industry trends and changes, which are constant. And AI is a constant drumbeat like every other industry. My world is adopting it much more quickly as a tool because of the efficiencies it creates. Because we are an overwhelmed responsible area of responsibility in healthcare. We have lots of stuff we deal with, and organizing and finding information is like huge. In fact, it kind of hurts me a little bit because I was really good at finding information, know where it was at. And that was a big part of who I am and who I was and what I needed to be in the industry. Now, that's a part that's not quite as valuable anymore because you can kind of just cue it and ask for it. And generally speaking, it gets you there or close pretty fast. So I love the force multiplication, but that part of a big part of my job is not needed anymore.
How does that feel for you as a professional?
Well, I'm okay with it in many ways because I'm an academic now trying to lead students into the next era of how do we adopt this and how can it be a force multiplier for us now? Mm-hmm. How can we get that burden of finding stuff now that that's gone? We've actually created some time, and how can we reuse that time? Right. I was always about efficiencies. I'll say things a lot of times like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Right. And I ask that all the time. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Because you get 1,000 things thrown at you and you got to do things that just are because you can get distracted. It's really not saying, yes to everything. It's saying yes to the right things and no to many things. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly trying to find out, is this really going to help me move forward? Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think we in facilities, we're multitaskers and we try to find efficiencies. It's a tool. And one interesting thing about that is that I asked recently during one of my presentations at a conference, I just popped it in there. I said, I wanted to know, I want you to finish this sentence. Okay. I'm going to give you 2 sentences and give you one word. AI is one word or AI is a one word, whichever phrasing resonates with you. Give me that one word. Fun. Because in academia, what I'm seeing, and I'm in academia, of course, but there's a lot of resistance, and there's a lot of people who will say AI is evil. AI is bad. AI is. There's a really strong, bright red line for those that are saying it's a tool, it's this, it's that, and those are saying no, I don't like it at all. And it's pretty distinct, and that's something that I see in academia, not in healthcare facilities. They're much more like, hey, we've got to adapt to it. So they're much more open to using it as a tool. So I feel like it's okay. It's okay. It's just another part of the transition of life and a career in society and economy. And but having said that, there is still that other side that I'm sure we'll talk about the dark side, if you will, that concerns many of us.
Well, I think sometimes, especially we're still at the beginning of all this this particular technology. I think a lot of times people give it too much power, and that's because the billionaires who want you to look at it a certain way and think it's going to do certain things and hype it up. And also, I think it's just a new thing and it's scary for people. So sometimes when people are like, "Oh, it's going to destroy critical thinking," I'm like, I don't know. We need to give it that much power. It's is it going to? I don't know that it can make students think critically. I don't think it can make them not think critically either. It seems that's kind of overblown. Also, something else you said I thought was interesting. What I always think that one of our jobs in this age of AI is to find out and actually have to ask the question, what should be automated in our careers and in our classrooms, et cetera? What should be automated? And the only reason it hasn't been until now is because it can't be. Now that it can be, what can we give to the robot to free us up? Like you said, I liked your positive attitude there. Like, yeah, it took this thing from me that I had a specialty in, finding things. And instead, now I've got to find a way to use that time, and you're using it productively. And I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, there's always more to do. And again, and you made a very excellent point about finding out. I say, is the juice worth the squeeze, right?
Right.
So the goal is to use it in such a way that it advances what you're trying to do. I mean, the opportunities to improve are endless in my mind. And one of the things, right, in what you said is that there are a lot of things and a lot of tasks. I think humans by nature, generally speaking, like variety. We like doing different things. And I think what's been proven out over the years that when you have someone do the same thing all the time repetitively, it's sort of a dehumanizing thing. It's just, it gets very difficult to just, I don't want to pick on any profession, but I really feel for people who do security, who have to sit there and watch. In 90% of the time, they're just observing and they're waiting for something to happen. To stay that aware for that long is tough, right?
Takes a lot of concentration.
Being engaged. And in my industry, like we do things like, for example, we'll check exit lights. Is the light lit every month? You go look at hundreds of lights to see if they're lit. I love the fact that we can automate that now. So they can monitor that, and if it's not lit, it tells us. Right. That to me is an example of like, let's take that away from the person of doing that really mindless job almost. Right. And let's give that to technology. And now we can go sit there and do vibration analysis on a motor. Right. And I love the idea that AI and this technology, again, what it does is it can monitor things for you 24/7, 365, and then tell you when there's a variance. Bring your attention to it.
Yeah.
Right. Bring your attention to it. And I think that's great for us, because again, things are happening. We don't hear the change. It sees it. It brings you to it. Now you can engage in very meaningful activity. And that's where I get to juice for the squeeze. Now it's a meaningful activity. So I love that ideal technology. I love that ideal AI. And I think finding more meaningful activities to do is really fantastic because in the short life, it means you can just accomplish, learn, master more things.
Yeah, there's this concept of offloading, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And MIT did a study back last year where they were talking about students offloading their cognitive activities to AI and how that could be a danger. But they pointed out if you teach students and you learn yourself how to use it mindfully and as a collaboration and not offload the things that you need for your brain, like struggle and having to find answers and trying to figure out how to say something before you turn to the robot. I mean, there are ways to do it where you're not offloading in the bad way. The thing is, we offload all the time, right? We've been offloading ever since technology. I mean, the wheel offloaded some burden, all technology, there's some offloading that goes on. That I guess the question is always, and including with AI, it's always how much cognitive offload is too much. How much will be hurting me? How much do I need to take on myself, that burden? I think it's an ongoing question. It's not an easy one to answer. And I think that's why some people go for black and white answers because it's complicated.
Well, and I think this has come at us so fast and so much, and we're in this ugly transformational period. We are going through this. Everything is tough in transition. Transition is the worst time of any activity you do. It's the worst time. And we're in this very, very, very ugly and it's coming really fast and humans. I think that's the downside. We don't adapt very quickly often, and we're doing a lot of commentary around something that is it's not done and it's coming fast and we're expected to change. And I think that pressure of being there already. People think we're already there when we're literally like in the beginning. One short illustration. So football helmets were recommended because so many injuries and deaths and concussions and all kinds of stuff back in, colleges were brought together by Teddy Roosevelt and the presidents in 1903. They were not fully adopted. They were adopted by the college fully in 1939. The last person to not wear a football helmet was the Chicago Bear player in 1943. It was nearly almost 40 years. And wow. if you go look at different transitions like that, you can see it in many things. It's like 30, 40 years. It takes 1 to 2 generations to fully adopt something and fully transition. So we tend to adopt and transition relatively slow. I think it's different lately. You can throw the calculator, the computer, the internet, social media, the smartphone, but you can still argue we're still trying to figure some of these technologies out and how to use them appropriately. And so it takes a while. It takes a while to do that. And I think this one is so much faster and so much more integrated into what we do and what we're going to be doing. I think it's going to be hard for us. I think this is going to be tough. I don't think this generation will not fully embrace this or know how to deal with this. It just we're too slow, and I just say that from just what I say, like historical context in my mind, what I've seen. So I think we're gonna have a challenge. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be difficult. This is a difficult time, and I understand that. I relate to that, and I feel that. At the exact same time, I'm seeing the disparity with my students really badly. I'm seeing those that are using it, those that are not using it, to a good and a bad effect. And for me, I'm trying to figure out how do I level this playing field. It's so funny. One of the other things I've really been paying attention to lately is I've been going back and watching Matrix.
Oh yeah, love the Matrix.
And Agent Smith. Agent Smith is a very interesting character. He essentially is the AI. Right. He's the AI. He's AI. And so you go back and watch those sentences, what he says again. It starts to become much more relevant to this conversation than ever when it comes to what AI can be, and I think why people often have fear of AI. But that being said, I still think the what we have to do is still the same. We have to generate authenticity, engagement, synthesis. We have to get people to use it as a tool and try to keep it in its place, if you will, I guess for as long as we can.
Now, I've heard some people, I've read, I read a lot about this topic, and, some people are pushing back against this idea that students will definitely need to be familiar with AI and how to use it mindfully because they'll need it in the workplace. And some people are saying, well, there's no evidence how do you know they're going to need it in the workplace? What do you think about that? Do you think this is a responsibility of educators to prepare students because they are going to encounter it? What about people who are like, well, we should teach them to push back against it because it's overblown, it's going to fade, and there's no proof they're going to need it in their work field?
Well, I think that the bringing attention to that statement is this. Each field is going to be a certain level of adoption. You're going to have essentially like some engineering fields. They're going to be super users. They're going to use it to fail and learn from that failure. It's going to be like almost a creative process, right, of using it. So they're going to be really deep into it, like your people who program, right? A lot of people aren't programmers, but obviously programming is at the foundation of everything we use, right? They're a part of people, and if your industry is training those people, they're going to be immersed. If you have folks that are more like an employee and you say, listen, I want you to be productive, you're going to find the tool within AI to use. In other words, this has been tested and filtered. You need to use this tool to produce this outcome, right? This is going to be part of the process. And a lot of managers will need to synthesize to create those tools for staff and personnel. They don't want staff figuring it out, right? That's not what you want. And then you have people that are just going to use it as essentially like you got Agentics or Claw or whatever, where you're going to synthesize it into your workflow and you're going to create efficiencies like in leadership and management, to create better documents, expedite, become efficient, if you will. Yeah. And then you got folks who are going to be just like very casual with it. They're just literally going to play with it, right? It's just a toy.
Yeah.
And you might even go so far as to find some people that are so much into the reality of life. Hey, I'm a, I don't know what you want to call them. Like, I am a purist. I know, and so I think we should allow for all of those. But as educators, we need to define that audience. And that's where we are. We're figuring that out right now. I think I'm trying to figure that out. What are the right tools, the right applications for my audience for what they do, so they stay competitive in their careers?
Right. And do you think this is part of academic freedom, whether an instructor decides to use AI or allow a use of AI, and to what degree and all that? Or do you think that instructors should be pressured or required to use AI or become familiar with it to teach their students? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it comes under the guidelines of best practice. So what you do is you study your profession, you study your field, you learn from others, you see what they're doing. And most of us are not going to be, I consider myself the front of the second third. I don't like being a first, third person. I don't like being bleeding edge. I don't like that. But usually by the time you get past that first third, there's proven best practices. And I think as whatever our profession is, that's where all of us need to sit. What is really working out there and producing good results that I can trust? And those are starting to come through now. Those are just starting to come through, because it takes time to get qualitative results. It's one thing to say, hey, try this, try that. It's nothing, does it work? The big pushback, I just injected a very specific strategy for essays into my classes, and I shared it with my instructors. I said, please apply this to one assignment. And I got some pushback a little bit. This is going to take me more time. This is going to take students more time. This is going to be a time issue. And I thought I had told them it may add a little bit, but the result is going to be so much better that little bit of added time, it's going to be worth it. Again, juice and squeeze. And I'm still working through that right now, right as we talk. And I told them, I said, what I'm going to do is I'm doing this, and I'm going to show you my results. So the initial was, hey, let's all try this if you like. I'm going to leave it to you to try it. I like you to get it one shot, one assignment. But then I'm going to share what I'm seeing, because that's someone who actually tested this and got great results, which I believe when I heard it, I was like, yeah, I can see this could work. So I'm going to test it. If it works out as well as I hope it does, then I will require my instructors to use it, because I will say, okay, it's good for the student, it's good for the instructor, it's good for the program. We're going to do it. So we're all doing those things right now. So the goal is best practices. And then we're going to these conversations and going to education and professional development where people can share those very tangible things within what you do. I think that's what's really going to move the needle. Show me that it works. Show me it produces results. Show me that it's not going to cost me a lot more time and stress, whatever. I think that's what we need to see, a lot of those little things. When we see it's working, I think you'll see adoption start to accelerate.
What do you think, if you had to list, like, in your opinion, the top few problems associated with AI in general? It could be in the classroom or just in general. What do you think are the top problems that we're facing, and what's the prospect for us solving or dealing with those problems, you think?
Yeah, the number one problem I'm seeing right now, and it's very easy for me, is that some students are still writing their own stuff traditionally, drawing it from references and critical references, and it's coming right from them. You can read it and it sounds like it's right from them. Other students are just essentially dropping your instructions into AI and producing a result, and they're not synthesizing it at all. And it's for me, it's fairly easy to see now. The writing is just so not. It's like it's coming out of some kind of a technical scientific magazine, not a person. And I fire shots constantly across their bows on this. They never push back, and sometimes they even come back and truly acknowledge. It's always like, I was so busy, had a crazy weekend, had to get it done, and they have these reasons for doing it. So that is a major issue. Related to that, they're doing, in my opinion, what I'm seeing, and this is a little more anecdotal, they're doing worse on quizzes. Because they're not synthesizing the information, when they get into the quiz environment, it's worse. The grades are slipping. So I see those two things as being real issues, if you will, that I think we've got to figure out how to create ways of holding them more accountable, digesting that information. I like to say, chew the cud, swallow it a couple times and spit it back up. And that way you kind of own it. And they're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're just going, boom, done, save time, and that, I think that's those are major issues. I think the third thing is, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is we don't really know how to use it yet. And so trying to instruct somebody on how to do something that's not been done before is kind of messy and ugly. And you end up like changing your mind sometimes. I hate when you're kind of, if you're the instructor and it's like they feel the herky jerkiness of you going through it. It doesn't look clean. It doesn't look pretty. Mm-hmm. And I try to say that to them. This isn't going to be a pretty time, folks. I said, if you're going to be going through kind of an ugly transition, bear with me. And I do a fair bit of apologizing. So, hey, listen, that didn't quite go the way I hoped, and and then I try to adjust with it. So it's kind of, I don't like that. I don't ever, as an instructor, you want things to be nice and clean and work and beautiful and whatever. And I'm finding that I'm like a fish out of water right now. I'm trying to figure it out, and I don't have the confidence I wish I had that I just had a few years ago.
Well, one of my favorite writers, David Deutsch from Oxford University, he wrote in a book called The Beginning of Infinity, which I've read several times. But he points out that problems are inevitable. That's their humans. We're always going to encounter problems, but all problems are solvable with the right knowledge. And so that has informed my approach to AI. There are problems with it, and cheating and plagiarism. That's a big one, right? And how to, without being police all the time and making our jobs about catching cheaters, how do we deal with that? But notice that it's uncovering problems we've always had in education. Cheating has always been a problem to some degree. Students not thinking and not synthesizing and not critically thinking, these have always been problems, right? So AI is accelerating and revealing these problems in a way that's kind of jarring and shocking to us, I think. But,
and that kind of leads to the other side, that leveling the playing field means I'm having to be much more intentional about creating these assignments and sort of putting them through, if you will, the eye of the needle. It's harder for them to kind of squeeze around it. Although, like, for example, one quick example, I'm going to have them start recording themselves more live. I'm going to give them scenarios and say, look, there are 4 deliveries that you have to do in this role, to administrators, to peers, to your employees, and to your customers. And I'm going to give them the setup, and they got to record the response. You have to write it, record it, and then not read it, but they're going to have to speak to me as if I am the administrator. Mm-hmm. With the graphic BBG, right? It's going to be more of I'm going to watch you deliver this, and I'm going to measure you basically on the delivery, on the content, whatever. So I'll be doing more of that live dynamic back and forth. My program is 100% online, so it's not actually in classroom. And they'll record themselves and do that. It's going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be a longer transition. But by the time they're done through my program, I think they're going to be really good, and I think that's going to be a very authentic way for them, again, they're going to have to do it, right? Going to have to repeat that process over and over again. Now, someone will say, well, you can, Mike, throw that into a image generator and they can go ahead and, I said, yes, I know. there is that too. And like you said, there will always be those cheaters who'll do it. And I won't be able to tell, or whatever. But but I sure hope that ethically and integrity and, you got to trust them at some point to do the right thing, right?
Well, yeah, and I think it's a cynical viewpoint that says all students, or most students even, will cheat just because they have the opportunity. I don't even think the research supports that. And cheating rates have been really ridiculously high since mid-20th century. But long before AI, self-reporting cheating rates are up around 80% in colleges consistently in studies. So there's a lot of complications there, self-reporting, and a lot of questions about why has cheating gone up since around 1940 to the degree that it has. But this idea that AI is suddenly going to create cheaters who wouldn't normally cheat, there's probably some of that bleed over, but I think that's a cynical viewpoint personally. I think a lot of my students recoil at the idea of using AI to cheat and do their work for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that point, one of these things is that I find that my sharpest students, smartest students will not use it, don't like to use it, and reject it the most. The weaker students are the ones that seem to be the ones that will use it, and in real life, I think I have permission to share this. I have several children, but my oldest son, he's kind of my engineering. He's an engineer today. Always been that way. He's a pretty smart Lego guy, constructing, tearing, and again, just always been that way. The other son is more he's great with people, but he's never been academically strong. Now he loves AI. He's like, he has it running when I'm talking to him on the phone. He likes finding corrections, and his confidence has gone way up. I'm really proud of how I see his confidence is really elevated. And I think that's wonderful, and he's actually trying more things. He thinks he's a programmer now, and all this other stuff. And my other son, still doing great. Not quite as, we haven't talked a lot about AI, him and I, but I can see my one son really elevating with it. And so I'm like, okay, this is really neat to see that confidence, and he's been very intentional. And I think to me, it's been good for him to see him build that confidence. And he's admitted, Dad, I didn't feel like a very smart guy, because now I feel like I'm pretty smart, so I'm like, okay, well, I'd go with that, and I think that's the way I see it even in the classroom. I think it does help some people gain confidence. Mm-hmm. And especially if you set the environment where you're getting them to create more intentional, they grow their understanding and they have intentional reflection, and you can see the growth. That's the whole goal, see them grow, right?
Yeah.
And I think we can set that for both groups. And I think AI can help us kind of do that.
What do you think, where are we headed with AI? Say like 5 years from now. What do you think, in your prediction, where are we headed?
Well, again, I think that we're going to find just like remember back in the day when apps started coming out, and now there's an endless number of apps that you can download on your phone, right. And they continue to get more and more. They continue to get more and more diverse and attractive. Even I'm sure everybody has some kind of app on gamings on their phone they downloaded, and I see the same way. I think with AI, we're going to see very useful tools, very useful quote, we'll call it apps, if you will, that are going to be coming through. And we're going to start in almost like modular. We're going to start putting those into Blackboard right now, for example. And I haven't even used it. Been talking about it now for a little bit. They put they have a tool in there where you can essentially create a personality based upon a real person, Edison, Madam Curie, whoever, and say, okay, I want you to have a conversation with Madam Curie. And then you can set the personality of Madam Curie to be either, difficult, challenging, easy, whatever. And then you give them the prompts to go and have this conversation, right? And stuff like that. So I think the interactions, creating these interactions with either historical, scientific, literature type individuals, I think is something that, is going to bring an interesting dynamic. And I can see that becoming more and more real. I remember, it's been going on for a little while, there's a really cool thing, the Holocaust Museum, where they found all these folks who volunteered. Initially, they had a handful that thought it'd be really sensitive. Then they found they had a bunch that wanted to do it. And they asked them hundreds and hundreds of questions, right? Mm-hmm. And they synthesized all those answers. They have them sit in a chair, asked all the questions. Now when you go to the museum, these students can just ask questions, and they sit there and talk to them like it's like real. It's like a dynamic conversation about what their experiences were, as a child, and this and that and everything else. And I think that's going to be something else that AI will certainly be able to do, is you can actually collect this information, this qualitative and quantitative information, and have those conversations, if you will. And I think that's really going to be, so you can talk to somebody. You want to talk to Einstein? Let's talk to Einstein today. Who do you want to talk to? It could get a little weird, but I think that, but I do think that because of AI, today, I think that lots of times people will inject a lot of their worldview into these conversations, and the conversation sort of leans towards a worldview versus sort of contextual, factual, historical information. Mm-hmm. And I think we could benefit from being more contextual, more historical, more factual. Mm-hmm. We all tend to get caught up in the reality of today, and that can weigh heavily on everything we think. Mm-hmm. But when you put it into context, wow, you know what I'm saying? It's not this shocking thing today. It's like there's this historical context that comes to it, and people can kind of look at things a little more, again, contextually. And I think that's really good. I think we need that. I think today, I think that's the problem with social media today. There's a lot of rage baiting out there. There's a lot of just getting someone's attention and people getting pulled into things and go down rabbit holes. Well, we could kind of pivot that back the other way and give it context, right? Yeah. It's really personality in the moment driven today. And I think that's been part of the problem with this little window of social media we've been in. And we've lost context. So I think we can actually bring context back, And I think that's going to be a very good thing. I think it's going to be a very good thing because we're going to find out we have a lot more in common than we don't. Yeah. And the world hasn't changed. And the world hasn't changed that much, right? Right.
What would you say to someone in higher education, say a faculty member, an instructor, who is hesitant to use AI or to allow its use, or even is resistant to the technology and feels like that it's a bad thing for higher ed and for the classroom? What would you say to a person who said this?
I kind of said it in a sense. This is a difficult time for us. So acknowledge that this is challenging. But also at the same time, be on the lookout for those things that you can use that make good sense for what you do. Look for those tools, look for those best practices that align with your value system, that align with your world of teaching, and bring them in. Do small things, kind of sort of scaffold. Don't worry about some people will dive in full body, but some people need to just dip their toe, and they need to see other people be successful. And I think that's part of it. You need to see how other people actually are making it successful. And I do believe, I don't care what you're doing today, I think it can make you, it can help you be better at what you do. And it can help your students be better at what they become. And so it's just a matter of finding those things that you trust. So everyone needs to look for trusted sources of information. Search for what I think are people who provide really quality, quantitative, relevant information, and then I sort of follow them, right? And just kind of keep following them and keep hearing. And then usually there's these nuggets you pick up, right? And I think that's it. Try to look for your trusted sources, and it is scary. It is scary, and I think when it comes to the administration side of things, I think be patient with us. There's some that are going to adopt very quickly. There's some that are going to adopt very slowly. Because industry has a tendency to want to move really, really fast. Hey, you need to be there now. You need to be there yesterday. Academia tends to fall a little slower, and the administrators tend to be in the middle. But they sort of like, hey, the customer says we need to be doing this now, right? And I feel that pressure, and I think that there needs to be a little buffer time for us. And I think 5 years is fair. I think 5 years from now, this conversation you and I are having today and what we're feeling out there will be very different. The other thing I would mention too is that there's a lot of power in AI. You got large language model per se, which is what most has started off as being, and you're getting into this conversation about small language model when you just feed it very specific content, right? And I think that we need to get better at small language model content education. In other words, don't let it look at the whole world. Feed it this piece of information, and then let it pretty much, stay inside of that, right? Give it some boundaries. Give it boundaries to draw from, And I think these are things that we're just now starting to understand. I don't know that people fully understand that you can even do that. So I think that's one thing as an instructor, you guys say, are you going to go look at the whole world, look at everything, and then try to draw from that? Or do you really want them to draw from this specific case study or this specific text or this specific whatever it is, create the framework for it and let it go inside of that. I personally believe that that's what we need to be doing. In fact, I talk a lot in my industry. We talk about building ownership for many, many years, which we struggle to own the building, the healthcare building, right? And I've been trying to get to the conversation to shift to building intimacy. Not just own the building, but really almost have a sense of get into how it operates, right? Get into because hospitals, each one is very different. They're all unique. Yeah. And so that building intimacy is knowing your building, your vintages, your equipment, all that stuff, your ages, all those kind of things in that building, and using technology to get you to really understand your building and know your motors, your air handlers, your layout, your configuration, your all that stuff, and then providing your facilities folks the tools to really understand that. Okay. And so I think that's where we get into this small language model idea. And I even think that because of that, we're getting closer to what they call general AI. I'm not sure when we get there, but part of what I hear is the challenge is that general AI can't really watch a video and really understand what's going on. It doesn't see everything in the background and all this and that. It has a hard time interpreting all that, right? But they're getting closer. And once it does that, I think that's a huge accelerant for everybody, especially for my industry. Because then I can go ahead and capture digital environments, and I can capture a video, and I can record procedures and practices, and then I can query AI for that stuff. Please show me this motor and show me the procedure, or show me how I transfer from city water to my well. It can go pull the video up of it being done. That kind of dynamic is where I see us going. Once we get to that, it can watch video and digest video like you and I watch it, right? I think a lot of people take for granted how much we absorb just by observing the world all around it, and AI can't quite do that. So to me, I think that is a really important, we need to be moving towards small language model type understanding having students get immersed in that and having AI kind of working in there with them, and being able to find those efficiencies that, and one thing about humans is that we probably forget more than we learn in lifetime. I feel like I'm heading there right now. And so it'd be nice to be able to draw from that history that I've forgotten, you know? Yeah. And I think that's part of what I'm talking about here. As you start feeding more history over time, it becomes more powerful, you know, because that's great. It holds that and go back and find it really quick for you. And I think that's where all of us are going to benefit from, you know, putting that history, building that history, those small language model histories to really squeeze out of it. Hey, you know, like, I remember that. Oh, yeah, it'll go find it for you. Yeah, it's going to become kind of like some historical gray matter for you. So I think that's something to keep an eye out on is that this idea of, you know, general information, small language model, and really getting really qualitative on the information. And letting it do that. And I think that's going to be in a lot of industries, a lot of professions, especially mine, because we have healthcare facilities are so unique. You know, each one is so unique. You really need very qualified, quantified information about that building, right? And you need to transfer knowledge from those seasoned individuals who are retiring and everything else. So this, to me, is a huge part of where I really am focusing on and been working on and working towards, and trying to figure out how to integrate that kind of understanding and knowledge and how to even create that in my course. Yeah.
I would like to thank you for taking the hot seat today. I hope it's not too warm in there for you.
It's a little warm, but it's okay. I got a short sleeve on.
Thank you for watching.